Everyone abandoned this alien girl, except the human soldier. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The storm rolled across the shattered forest like a living thing, crackling with charged particles that made the air hum against Sergeant Elias Ward's helmet. He moved through the wreckage slowly, every step crunching over twisted metal and shards of scorched bark. His HUD flickered, fighting the interference, warning him that his squad's signals had gone dark hours ago. The battlefield was quiet now, too quiet. Only the soft hiss of cooling debris and the distant groan of fallen ships broke the silence. Elias swept his flashlight across the rubble. Smoke curled upward in thin, ghost-like ribbons. His breath fogged inside the cracked edge of his visor. He was tired, bone-tired, but he kept moving because stopping meant leaving someone behind, and he'd already done too much of that for one lifetime. That was when he heard it. A soft, broken sound. Not quite a cry. More like breath catching on pain. Elias froze, adrenaline tightening his muscles. He pivoted, scanning the shadows. Hello? If you can hear me, don't move. I'm here to help. His voice disappeared into the static-filled air. Another sound came, closer this time, a weak, involuntary whimper. Elias pushed aside a fallen piece of hull plating. Underneath, curled against the dirt and glowing embers, was a girl. Not human. Her skin shimmered with a pale violet sheen, bruised in deep indigo patches. Her hair, long, silver, tangled, drifted with every shaky inhale. Metal cuffs glowed faintly around her wrists, humming with energy. Someone hadn't just abandoned her. They had restrained her, condemned her. She blinked up at him through eyes that were too bright for the darkness, pupils trembling like she was fighting to stay conscious. When she tried to pull back, the cuffs yanked her forward, sending a sharp cry out of her throat. Elias raised both hands slowly. Hey, it's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. Her voice came out. Rough, scraped raw. Don't touch me. Human. Not a threat. A plea. A plea from someone who had been taught that humans were the monsters. Elias knelt, pushing aside a glowing ember with his boot. You're hurt. Let me at least check. Leave. Her breath shivered. That's what they all did. Lightning flared across the clouds, bathing the clearing in harsh white light. For a split second, Elias saw the burned symbol on her collar. A mark of exile, cast out by her own people. He exhaled, slow and steady. I'm not them. The girl, Kaeli'Ryn, as he'd later learn, watched him with a mixture of terror and disbelief. The wind tore through the clearing again, scattering ash across her legs. She flinched. Elias shrugged off his thermal cloth and draped it gently over her shoulders. She gasped softly at the warmth, confused that he'd give something away without expecting anything back. There, he murmured. Better. Her lips parted, maybe to argue, maybe to thank him, but her strength gave out. Her head dipped forward, silver hair falling across her face. Elias leaned in, checking her pulse, gentle as a whisper. Still alive. Still fighting. I've got you, he said, though she was already slipping into unconsciousness. He scanned the storm front closing in. Fast, violent, unrelenting. They'd never survive exposure out here. Elias slid his arms beneath her, lifting her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, like a bundle of trembling wires and fading heat. As he stood, Kaylee's fingers twitched weakly against his chest plate, as if her body didn't trust him but desperately wanted to. Elias looked down at her, this abandoned girl, this forgotten life, and felt something shift inside him. A quiet vow. No more leaving people behind. Not today. Not her. Holding her close, he turned toward the ruined canyon where he'd seen shelter earlier, boots crunching over the debris as the storm roared behind him like a warning he chose not to hear. The storm had chased them all the way to the narrow canyon mouth, its electric roar building behind Sergeant Elias Ward like a living beast hungry for anything left exposed. He ducked beneath an overhang of shattered stone, holding Kaeli'Ryn close as her faint breath warmed the inside of his armor. The dim blue glow from the canyon walls flickered across her face, revealing the exhaustion carved into every delicate line. Her silver hair clung to his chest plate, still, trembling from cold and fear. Elias knelt carefully, setting her down against a slab of rock, and only then did he realize how badly she was shaking. Her skin, normally faintly luminous, looked too pale. The cuffs around her wrists sparked weakly, the leftover energy stinging the air with a burnt metallic smell. He reached for them slowly. "I need to get these off you," he said. Kaylee forced her eyes open, her voice barely a whisper. "You cannot break them. They were meant to hold criminals." Elias examined the cuffs. Alien design. Layered energy seal. Damaged, but not enough. He pulled a tool from his belt, a compact cutter barely holding charge after the crash. "Good thing I am stubborn," he muttered. The cutter flared to life, its orange beam slicing through the air. Kaylee winced as sparks skittered across her skin. "Stay still," Elias said, his tone softer now, almost gentle. "I know it hurts. I am sorry." She looked at him with a mix of disbelief and confusion, as if she could not understand why he apologized to someone like her. The cutter sputtered, then hissed through the final segment. The cuff snapped open with a sharp pop. Kaylee gasped, pulling her hand close to her chest as though unsure it truly belonged to her. Elias moved to the second cuff. She swallowed. "Human, why are you doing this?" He did not answer immediately. His focus stayed on the weak cutter as it fought to cut the second lock. The glow dimmed, then flared again. Finally, the cuff fell away and clattered onto the stone. Elias exhaled. "Because you were left to die," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "And that is not something I can walk past." She lowered her gaze. "My people said humans were violent, cruel, that you destroy what you touch." Elias almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I destroy plenty," he admitted. "But not today. Not you." Kaylee looked away, but her breathing steadied just slightly, as if part of her wanted to believe him. A deep rumble echoed through the canyon. Elias glanced toward the entrance. The storm front glowed bright white, lightning ripping jagged lines across the sky. They had minutes at best before it rolled over them. He scanned the narrow cave-like recess extending deeper into the rock. "We need to move inside," he said. "The storm will cook us alive if we stay here." He slid an arm beneath her shoulders and another under her knees. She stiffened instinctively. "I can walk," she whispered. He looked down at her legs. "Injured. Weak. Barely holding her weight earlier." "You will, once we get you healed up," he replied. "But right now, let me help." She hesitated, then finally allowed herself to relax against him. He carried her deeper into the canyon, illuminated only by the faint blue shimmer of mineral veins in the walls. Every few steps, Kaylee's fingers curled slightly into his armor, as though she feared he might disappear if she did not hold on. The tunnel widened into a hollow chamber, shielded from the storm. Elias set her down gently on a patch of smooth stone. The wind outside transformed into a snarling howl as the plasma surge hit full force. Sparks rained down the canyon entrance like shooting stars. Kaylee shivered. "If they find me," she murmured, voice thin, "they will finish what they started." Elias adjusted the thermal cloth around her shoulders. "Then I guess they will have to get through me." She stared at him for a long moment, eyes bright in the dimness, something fragile forming behind them. "No one has ever stood between me and danger," she whispered. "Not even my own people." Elias sat beside her, close enough for his body heat to reach her through the cold. "There is a first time for everything," he said. Outside, the storm growled against the stone, but inside the hollow chamber, a quiet formed around them. A quiet heavy with unspoken questions, unfamiliar hope, and a strange beginning neither of them understood yet. The storm outside roared like a creature pacing the canyon mouth, but deep inside the hollow chamber, only the faint hum of mineral veins lit the darkness. Sergeant Elias Ward knelt by the small emergency heater he had managed to coax back to life, watching its weak orange glow spread just enough warmth to keep Kaeli'Ryn from slipping deeper into shock. She leaned against the stone wall, her breathing steadier now, though her eyes were still glassy with exhaustion. The cuffs he had removed had left faint burns around her wrists, thin glowing marks that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Elias set a ration pack beside her. "It is not great, but it will. Keep your strength up," he said. Kaylee stared at it, as if unsure what to do. "Our people do not eat this way," she murmured. Elias smiled faintly. "Most humans do not either. But it works." After a long moment, She reached for the pack with careful fingers, her movements delicate and almost ceremonial. She took a small bite, paused, then took another. "It is strange," she whispered, "but not unpleasant." Elias sat across from her, leaning back against the opposite wall, careful to give her space, even though the chamber forced them closer together than either of them expected. The heater flickered again, casting brief shadows across her face, highlighting the sharp angles of fear that had not yet let her go. "Kaeli," Elias said quietly, "the mark on your collar earlier, that was not a criminal symbol, was it?" She froze. Her fingers tightened around the ration pack. For a moment, she looked like she might shut down again, the way someone does after too much pain. Then she exhaled, a soft tremor of defeat. "It is a mark of expulsion," she said. "My people decided my existence was a threat. They cast me out so I would die far from home." Elias felt anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. "A threat? How could you be a threat to anyone?" She lifted her eyes to his, the glow in them dim but steady. "Because I know something they want buried. Because I saw what they did. And because I refused to lie for them." Elias leaned forward slightly. "You do not have to tell me more. Not now." Kaeli shook her head. "You should not help me, Elias Ward. If they track me, if they find us, they will kill you without hesitation." He glanced toward the narrow tunnel where the storm screeched against the stone. "I have dealt with worse odds." "Not like them," she whispered. Her voice trembled, not from cold, but from memory. "They will not stop." Elias shifted closer, slow enough for her to see he meant no harm. "Then they will have to deal with me." She looked away again, but this time something in her expression softened, as if a wall she had carried her whole life had begun to crack under the weight of his sincerity. "Humans are confusing," she whispered. "You fight. You destroy. Yet you protect a stranger with no reason to do so." Elias scratched the back of his neck. "Maybe we are confusing. Maybe we are just stubborn." She studied him, her eyes reflecting the heater's faint glow. "Or maybe you are different from the ones I was taught to fear." A distant boom echoed through the canyon, a low metallic thud that did not belong to the storm. Elias's head snapped up. He reached for his rifle. That was not thunder. Kaeli stiffened, clutching the thermal cloth tighter around her shoulders. "They are searching," she whispered. "The storm will not stop them." Elias moved to the tunnel entrance, scanning the canyon beyond. Through the lightning flashes, he saw faint shapes moving against the storm, figures wearing reflective armor that bent the light around them. A tracking squad. Alien. Relentless. Getting closer. Elias stepped back toward Kaeli, his voice low and steady. "They found your trail." Kaeli's throat tightened. "They will kill you if you stay near me." Elias shook his head. "Not happening." He checked his weapon, the metal warm from his grip. "If they want you, they will have to go through me first." For the first time since he had found her, something like hope flickered behind her eyes. A fragile belief that maybe, just this once, she was not alone. The storm growled outside, the cave trembling with every blast of wind, but Elias stayed exactly where he was, positioning himself between Kaeli and the danger approaching. And Kaeli, her voice barely more than a breath, whispered, "No one has ever stood for me before." Elias did not look back. Get used to it. The canyon chamber felt smaller as the sounds outside sharpened into something unmistakable. The storm's roar remained constant, but beneath it, Elias Ward heard the hollow clank of armored boots striking stone. He lifted his rifle, steadying his breath as he moved toward the narrow passage that led back to the canyon entrance. Sparks drifted in from the storm, casting quick flashes of white across the walls. Kaeli'Ryn pulled the thermal cloth tighter around her shoulders, her eyes wide, her body tense. "The tracking squads have found us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias gave a short nod without looking back. "Yes, but they are not inside yet." He positioned himself just at the edge of the corridor where he could see movement but not be seen. A beam of scanning lights swept across the canyon floor, followed by distorted voices speaking in a language that carried sharp consonants and static undertones. Kaeli pressed a hand to the stone for support. Her voice shook. "It is Captain Veros. He leads the squads that silence anyone who speaks against the council. If he is here, then they did not come to retrieve me. They came to ensure I do not survive this night." Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then we make sure we do." The scanning beam passed again, this time sliding across the cave entrance. Elias stepped back into the shadows, waiting. Kaylee's breathing grew shallow. You do not understand, Elias Ward. They can track energy signatures, heat signatures, even the mineral resonance in these stones. They will find us. Not if we stay quiet and move when they move, Elias said. His voice had that low, grounded calm that belonged to soldiers who had survived war through instinct rather than luck. A burst of static crackled through the air, followed by a sharp metallic scrape. A drone. Elias leaned forward and saw a small floating device glide toward the entrance. It emitted thin threads of blue light, weaving through the storm air like searching fingers. Stay back, Elias whispered. Kaylee pressed herself deeper against the wall, trying not to make a sound. The drone drifted closer, its sensors blinking with predatory awareness. Elias waited until it was close enough that he could hear the faint hum of its power core. Then he moved. He lunged from behind the stone pillar, grabbing the device with one hand and driving the butt of his rifle into its core. The drone sparked violently and died, collapsing in a shower of blue fragments. The noise echoed through the canyon. Kaylee gasped. They heard that. Elias knew she was right. Already the footsteps shifted direction, converging toward the sound. The storm lit up the canyon in another burst of white light, revealing 3 armored figures moving quickly toward the chamber. Their armor shimmered with reflective plating that made their silhouettes distort in the lightning flash, but Elias recognized the shape of their weapons. Compact plasma lances that could cut through stone in seconds. Elias stepped back into the chamber, raising his rifle. When I tell you to move deeper into the tunnel, you move. Do not stop. Do not. Look back. Kaylee shook her head. I will slow you down. Leave me. Elias stared at her, his voice steady and unshakable. That is not going to happen. The footsteps grew louder. The first soldier's shadow stretched across the chamber wall. Elias aimed at the narrow passage and fired a precise shot. The round struck the rock just above the soldier's head, spraying shards of stone and forcing the intruder to retreat. A second armored figure swung around, firing a burst of searing blue energy into the cave. The blast hit the stone inches from Elias, showering him with debris and heat. Kaylee cried out, instinctively reaching toward him, then pulling back as fear overtook her. Elias ducked behind a rock formation, reloading with practiced movements. Kaylee, go. Now. She hesitated only a heartbeat, then pushed herself deeper into the dark tunnel. Elias stayed in the open, drawing fire away from her. Plasma bolts scorched the floor at his feet, the heat punching through the thin air in waves. More shadows approached. More boots pounded against stone. Elias fired again, forcing them to slow their advance. He is protecting her. A soldier snarled in their harsh alien tongue. She is the target. Eliminate the human. Elias heard them, even if he did not understand every word. He understood enough. He shifted positions, forcing them to follow him rather than move toward the tunnel. Come on, he muttered under his breath. You want me? Then come and get me. Behind him, deeper in the tunnel, Kaylee whispered a trembling sentence meant only for herself. Please live, Elias Ward. Outside, the storm screamed louder, as if the world itself held its breath for what would happen next. The tunnel behind Elias Ward pulsed with faint blue light as Kaeli'Ryn retreated deeper into the darkness, her steps unsteady, her breath catching every few seconds as fear and exhaustion fought for control. Elias stayed near the chamber entrance, rifle raised, listening to the metallic rhythm of armored boots approaching. The storm outside blended with the footsteps until the entire canyon seemed to vibrate with the threat closing in. A plasma bolt seared past Elias's shoulder, scorching the wall and flooding the chamber with white light. He rolled behind a jagged outcrop, firing a controlled burst that struck the leading soldier's shoulder plate. The alien staggered, not expecting resistance from a lone human. Another bolt tore into the stone above Elias, showering him with burning fragments. You cannot escape, human, a distorted voice echoed, its tone metallic and chilling. Surrender, and your death will be quick. Elias wiped the dust from his visor and breathed steadily, the way he had been trained. Panic never helped. Movement did. Thinking did. Kaylee's voice whispered in his mind, fragile and frightened, telling him to live. He pushed up from cover and fired again, forcing the enemy squad back behind the canyon rocks. He knew they would regroup within seconds. They were not like human soldiers. They did not panic. They did not hesitate. They followed orders with absolute precision. Elias glanced toward the tunnel. Kaeli needed time, and time was running out. "Come on," he muttered. "Just a little more." The chamber shook as a heavy impact rattled the stone ceiling. Another squad had landed outside. He could hear the new group coordinating with the first, their language sharp, efficient, deadly. Elias gritted his teeth. Of course they brought reinforcements. He grabbed a small charge from his belt, slapped it onto the crumbling stone pillar beside him, and set the timer for 5 seconds. He dashed back toward the tunnel as energy bolts rained down behind him. At the 5th beep, the pillar exploded inward, filling the front of the chamber with dust and debris. Not enough to trap the soldiers, but enough to slow them. Elias sprinted down the tunnel, his boots pounding against the cold stone, the echoes mixing with the pounding of his heart. He spotted Kaeli halfway down the passage, bracing herself against the wall, her fingers trembling. "Elias Ward," she whispered. "They are coming." He nodded, grabbing her gently by the arm to steady her. "I know. We need to move." The tunnel curved sharply, leading them into a larger cavern illuminated by shimmering blue crystals that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kaeli's eyes widened. She knew this place. "This is a resonance chamber," she said softly. "The stone here interferes with tracking systems." Elias allowed himself a small breath of relief. "Then we have a chance." He guided her toward the far end of the cavern where the crystals grew thicker and the air buzzed with static. Kaeli winced as a spark arced across her arm. "The energy here is unstable," she murmured. "It feeds on movement and emotion." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Emotion?" She nodded weakly. "These crystals developed near fault lines where our people fought a civil war centuries ago. They absorbed what was left behind. Anger, fear, all of it." Elias glanced warily at the glowing walls. "Great. Haunted rocks." Kaeli almost smiled. Almost. Footsteps erupted from the tunnel behind them. Louder now, closer. Elias pulled Kaeli behind a cluster of tall crystals just as plasma bolts ripped through the cavern entrance, sending shards of luminous mineral flying through the air like glowing knives. Kaeli gasped, clutching Elias's arm. The crystals around them flickered violently, reacting to her fear. Their light pulsed brighter, sending waves of energy rippling across the cavern floor. Elias tightened his grip on her wrist. "Kaeli, listen to me. You have to stay calm. If the crystals overload," a thunderous crack cut him off. The central crystal column split open, releasing a shockwave of pale blue energy that slammed through the cavern. The tracking squad at the entrance was thrown backward, their armor sparking as they hit the stone. Elias shielded Kaeli with his body as the wave washed over them. Kaeli trembled. "I did not mean to. It is fine," Elias said, steadying her. "But we need to get out before it happens again." The soldiers struggled to rise, dazed but not defeated. Elias lifted Kaeli, bracing her weight against him as he guided her toward a narrow side passage partially hidden behind crystal growths. As they slipped inside, Kaeli looked up at him, her voice barely a breath. "Why are you still helping me?" Elias did not look back at the soldiers closing in. He kept moving. "Because you would have died alone," he said. "And I am not letting that be your story." Behind them, the crystals hummed with unstable energy, and the shadows of the armored squad stretched across the cavern as they prepared to pursue once more. The sealed passage carried them downward into a darkness so complete that even Elias Ward's visor struggled to adjust. Only the faint blue glow lingering on Kaeli'Ryn's skin softened the void around them. The air grew warmer as they descended, vibrating with a low hum that made the stone walls feel alive beneath their fingertips. Kaeli leaned lightly against Elias, not entirely out of weakness, but because the tunnel floor sloped treacherously and the shock of the earlier energy wave had left her legs. Trembling, Elias kept his arms steady around her back, guiding her step by step. "These tunnels are part of the ancient understructure," Kaeli whispered, her voice almost swallowed by the dark. "Not even the council patrols come this deep." Elias glanced back toward the sealed wall behind them. "Good. That gives us a chance." But even as he said it, he felt the growing intensity of the air, as though something ahead radiated heat and energy in equal measure. The glow around Kaeli brightened slightly, and Elias noticed the patterns on her skin responding to the tunnel's hum. Faint lines of bioluminescent markings he had not seen before. Kaeli, he said softly, your skin is glowing more than usual. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. It is a genetic trait. It reacts to stress and energy fields. I cannot control it. Elias shook his head. You do not have to. It helps us see. Her eyes flickered up to him, surprised by the ease in his tone, the lack of judgment she had come to expect from soldiers, especially human ones. They moved deeper until the tunnel widened abruptly into a massive chamber filled with heat and shimmering air. A molten river of glowing mineral flowed through the center, its light reflecting across the chamber in gold and blue waves. Elias stared. That is not lava. No, Kaeli murmured. It is crystallized energy, liquefied under pressure. The ancestors used it to power ancient structures. It is unstable. We must be careful. Elias guided her along a narrow ledge beside the river, their shadows stretching long across the glowing surface. Every few seconds, the river pulsed with a low boom that vibrated in his ribs. Kaeli steadied herself, placing one hand against the wall, and Elias noticed her breathing quicken. What is wrong? He asked. She hesitated, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. This chamber, it is a threshold. Anyone crossing it leaves a trace. They will know we were here. Elias looked back over his shoulder, jaw tightening. Then we keep moving before they catch up. They continued across the ledge, the heat growing more intense. Kaeli swayed suddenly, her knees buckling. Elias caught her just before she collapsed. Kaeli, he said, lowering his voice in concern, talk to me. What is happening? She pressed a hand to her temple, her skin glowing brighter with every pulse of the molten river. The energy, it resonates with my bloodline. It is overwhelming. I cannot control the reaction. Elias crouched, helping her sit against the cool stone, shielding her from the immediate heat. Her breath grew shallow, her eyes unfocused. He placed a steady hand on her cheek. Kaeli, look at me. Stay with me. She tried, but a wave of energy surged through her, making the chamber lights flicker violently. The molten river roared in response, its glow intensifying until it lit the chamber like a second sun. Elias felt the heat slam against him, like a force pushing him back. Kaeli gasped, clutching his wrist as if anchoring herself. You must go, she whispered, her voice trembling. If the chamber reacts fully, it will collapse. You cannot die here. Elias leaned closer, refusing to move. I am not leaving you. Tell me how to stop this. Tears gathered in the corners of her glowing eyes, not of sadness but of fear. You cannot stop it. Only someone with my blood can stabilize the chamber. I must focus, but I cannot do it alone. The energy is too strong. Elias placed both hands on her shoulders, grounding her with the warmth of his steady grip. Then I will help you. She shook her head weakly. Humans cannot channel our resonance. It will kill you. Elias's voice softened, but it did not waver. Kaeli, listen to me. You are not dying in this cave. If this thing needs someone to anchor you, then let it be me. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever offered themselves for her sake. No one had ever refused to abandon her, not even when it meant their life. Her breath trembled. Elias Ward, she whispered, why? Elias held her gaze as the molten river pulsed brighter and the chamber walls shuddered. Because you matter, he said, and I am not losing you. She closed her eyes, trusting him in a way she had never trusted anyone, and placed her glowing hand over his. The chamber roared as their energies collided, and the threshold reacted with a violent surge of light that filled the entire world in white fire. The white fire did not burn. It folded around them like a living veil, pulling Elias Ward and Kaeli'Ryn into a moment suspended outside sound and time. When the blinding surge finally dimmed, Elias found himself kneeling on the cavern floor, one hand braced against the stone, the other still clasping Kaeli's glowing fingers. The molten river had calmed, its violent pulsing reduced to a slow, steady rhythm, as if the chamber itself had taken a long breath and finally settled. Kaeli leaned into him, trembling, her skin dimming back to its usual soft luminescence. Her voice came out faint, weary. You anchored me. A human anchored me. Elias steadied her with an arm around her back. You did the hard part. She shook her head weakly. You should not be alive. No human has ever survived resonance contact with our bloodline. The energy alone should have. She trailed off, staring at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. Elias shrugged. though the truth was his muscles still shook and every heartbeat felt heavier than the last. First time for everything. For a brief, fragile moment, she allowed herself a small smile, something warm and grateful flickering across her expression. But the moment shattered when a metallic clang echoed from the tunnel behind them, followed by distorted voices barking orders. Kaeli stiffened. They broke through the seal. Elias rose, lifting her with him. Then we move. Now. They followed a narrow alcove that branched off the main chamber, winding through uneven stone corridors that had not been walked in centuries. The hum of ancient energy quieted behind them, replaced by the rhythmic thunder of armored boots. Kaeli leaned heavily against Elias as they climbed a steep incline that opened into a cavern half-lit by natural skylight, filtering through cracks far above. The air smelled of cold mineral dust and old storms. Elias scanned the space. We can cross this ridge and, Elias Ward. Kaeli whispered sharply, tugging his sleeve. He turned just as a group of armored soldiers emerged from a higher ledge, their reflective plating bending the light around them. At their center stood a taller figure with jagged crimson markings etched across his armor. His voice cut across the cavern like a blade. Kaeli'Ryn of the Varathian line. You were ordered extinguished. Kaeli's breath hitched, the fear in her eyes shifting to something deeper, something personal. Captain Veros, she whispered. Elias raised his rifle, stepping in front of her. I am guessing this is the one who wants you dead the most. He is the one who gave the order, she said, her voice trembling. He is the reason the council erased my name. Veros lifted his weapon, its core glowing with lethal intent. Your existence threatens the unity of our people. You carry truths that should never reach the light. Elias steadied his stance. Funny. She said the same thing. Veros shifted his attention to Elias, his tone dripping with contempt. Human, you interfere in matters beyond your understanding. Stand aside, and I will end you quickly. Elias did not move. Not happening. Veros fired. Elias tackled Kaeli behind a stone pillar as the blast scorched the air where they had stood. The shockwave hit the pillar, cracking it down the center. Kaeli gasped as Elias shielded her with his body, heat washing over his back in a violent wave. She grabbed his arm. You cannot fight him. His armor is layered with resonance plating. Your weapons will not break through. Elias checked his ammo, jaw clenched. Suggestions? Kaeli hesitated, her eyes darting to the skylight above where thin shafts of pale light pierced the dust. The light fractures through the mineral dust. It can destabilize his plating if the angle is right. Elias looked up, then back at Veros advancing with heavy, deliberate steps. Tell me where to move him. Kaeli placed a trembling hand on Elias's wrist, guiding his line of sight. There, beneath the largest shaft. If he stands there, the resonance will overload. Elias nodded once. Stay behind this pillar. He stepped out from cover, firing deliberately inaccurate shots to pull Veros forward. The captain advanced with confident strides, each blast from his weapon shaking the cavern floor. Elias moved backward, step by step, drawing him closer to the fractured column of light. Kaeli watched with her hand over her mouth, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it echo in her skull. Elias reached the marked spot and stopped. Come on then, he called out. Let us finish this. Veros raised his weapon, stepping directly into the fractured beam of pale light. The effect was instantaneous. His armor sizzled, resonance plating crackling violently as the light refracted across its energy lines. Veros froze, confusion turning to alarm. What? A deafening crack tore through the cavern as his armor destabilized, releasing a wave of feedback that knocked him backward in a burst of blue sparks. Elias shielded his face as the shockwave rippled outward. Kaeli cried out his name. When the dust settled, Veros lay motionless, his armor scorched and darkened. Elias stumbled back to Kaeli, lungs burning, vision unsteady. She gripped his arm, eyes full of fear and relief. Elias Ward, you should not have survived resonance and now armor feedback. You should be dead. Elias exhaled, leaning against the stone to steady himself. Yeah, he said softly, but you are alive. And for Kaeli, that truth meant more than any law her people had ever written. The cavern settled into a heavy silence after Captain Veros fell, the last echoes of the armor feedback fading into the fractured skylight above. Dust drifted through the beams of pale light, twisting gently like falling ash. Elias Ward stood still for a long moment, steadying his breath while the sting of residual energy throbbed beneath his ribs. Kaeli'Ryn clung lightly to his arm, her fingers trembling, her eyes fixed on Varos's motionless body. "It is over," she whispered, though the words sounded more like a question than a truth. Elias glanced down at her, his voice quiet. "For him, maybe. Not for us." She swallowed hard, understanding exactly what he meant. The council would not stop simply because one captain had failed. They would send more. They would hunt her. And if they learned a human had interfered, they would hunt him too. Elias scanned the cavern walls until he spotted a narrow outflow tunnel on the opposite ledge, half buried in debris. A faint draft of fresh air drifted from within. "Come on," he murmured, guiding her gently. "If that tunnel opens to the upper ridge, we can get above the canyon before the next squad reaches us." Kaylee nodded, though her legs buckled with each step. Every ounce of her energy had been poured into surviving the resonance chamber. Elias tightened his hold around her waist, practically carrying her across the uneven stone. When they reached the outflow tunnel, Elias boosted her up first, letting her crawl onto the ledge before pulling himself after her. The tunnel beyond narrowed sharply but sloped upward, lit occasionally by cracks in the ceiling that let in slivers of storm-hazed daylight. The air tasted clean for the first time since their descent underground. Kaylee paused halfway up the incline, turning slowly to look back at him. "Elias Ward," she said softly, "if you leave me here and return to your people, they may never know you were involved. You could still live." Elias looked at her, truly looked, seeing not the fear that had chased her, not the exhaustion that weighed on her limbs, but the quiet, fragile hope that someone might finally choose her over safety. "I did not come this far to leave you at the exit," he said. "You are not alone anymore." Her eyes glistened, not from the dust, but from a feeling she could not name. They climbed until the tunnel opened onto a high ridge overlooking the canyon that had nearly become their grave. The storm had passed, leaving the sky washed in pale gold. Smoke rose from distant cliffs where resonance impacts had scorched the earth. Kaylee stood beside him, the wind stirring her silver hair, her expression full of awe and disbelief. "I never thought I would see open sky again," she whispered. Elias watched her quietly, the sunlight catching the faint luminescent markings across her cheeks. "You will see a lot more than that," he said. "There is an extraction beacon in my crash kit. If we reach a clear point, I can signal my people. They will get us off this world." Kaylee turned toward him, her voice trembling with something deeper than fear. "Your people will not want me. I bring danger. I bring war." Elias shook his head. "You bring truth. And someone has to hear it." A distant rumble broke the moment. On a far ridge, small shapes appeared against the horizon, sleek council skimmers traveling fast. Kaylee's breath caught. "They are still coming." Elias stepped in front of her as instinctively as breathing. "Let them come. We will not be here when they arrive." He adjusted the straps on his torn armor, reaching to lift her again when she surprised him by placing her hand over his. "Elias Ward," she murmured. "Before we go, there is something you must know." He met her gaze, steady and patient. "All right." Her eyes softened in a way he had not seen before, a quiet surrender to trust. "The council fears my testimony because it reveals the truth about the war. But the truth is not just political. It is personal. My bloodline, it is the line of Varathian heirs. I am not only a witness. I am the last rightful successor to the council they corrupted." Elias absorbed that, breath slow and controlled. Not shock, not panic, just understanding. "So they were not just hunting a dissenter," he said quietly. "They were hunting a queen." Kaylee lowered her head. "A queen with no throne and no allies." Elias reached up and lifted her chin gently until her eyes met his. "You have one now." In the stillness that followed, Kaylee felt the world shift beneath her feet, not from fear or energy resonance, but from the realization that someone had chosen her not because of her lineage but because of her life. Below them, the council skimmers advanced. Above them, the sky widened into endless possibility. Elias activated the emergency beacon, its bright signal piercing the afternoon air like a promise. Kaylee stepped closer to him, her voice soft but steady. "Elias Ward, why do you keep risking everything for me?" He looked at her with the quiet conviction of a man who had already made peace with his answer. Because you were abandoned by everyone else, he said, and that was wrong. The wind carried her breath away as she whispered, and you stayed. Elias nodded once, the faintest smile touching his lips. He was not a hero, he said, almost to himself. Just human. And somehow that was enough. The beacon's signal flared brighter. The sky opened. And together, they stepped forward into whatever future waited for them beyond the canyon's edge.